Alistair Carmichael to move the motion.
Thank you very much, Mr Betts, and it's a pleasure to serve with you in the chair. I welcome the Minister, or Minister for a day, to her position, and I'm grateful to see that there are actually a number of other colleagues here in the chamber today. I should perhaps first of all place on record that I chair in this House the APPG for the Baha'is in the United Kingdom. And in that regard, before I come to the meat of what I want to say, I should place on record the appreciation that I feel, and indeed I know that my predecessors felt, for the work of the Baha'i office in the United Kingdom. Dan Wheatley in particular and his various colleagues over the years have been of enormous service to us all. And the Baha'i communities in my own constituency in Orkney and Shetland. Orkney and Shetland are home to two small but very effective and warm, welcoming Baha'i communities who have demonstrated great fellowship to me and to my family over the years, for which I've always been enormously grateful. Persecution of the Baha'i community in Iran is hardly new. It has been a feature of life for Baha'is in Iran since the 1979 Iranian Revolution. But this year, over the summer, we have seen a sharp increase in the number of innocent Baha'is facing persecution from the Iranian state. And it is unfortunate, it grieves me that we have to bring this matter to the House today. But I hope that those who are suffering that persecution will take some comfort from hearing the reference made to it in this House, and those names that I will come to in the course of my speech should understand that their suffering and their persecution is seen, and it will not be ignored by those of us who care about human rights for everyone. Iran does not have a good record on human rights. I think that's something that would be uncontroversial across the chamber. But rather than getting grips with it, the country has stepped up the oppression of its own people in recent years. From arbitrarily detaining protesters, to persecuting the LGBTQ+ community, to conducting the second highest number of executions around the world, there is a great deal about which we should worry about the state of human rights and freedom in Iran. I don't want to touch on it for any great length, but I think it would be remiss of me if I were not to mention what we have seen in recent weeks in Iran. In particular, we should mourn the loss of the 22-year-old Kurdish woman, Masha Amini, who tragically died in police custody after being detained for alleged violations of Iran's strict dress code. It is within this context, the context of a brutal regime, that we come to Iran's oppression of the Baha'i community inside its own borders. Iran's religious minorities have suffered for too long at the hands of the state. The Baha'i community of Iran has an estimated 350,000 believers, and they have long faced systematic oppression orchestrated by the government. That alone merits discussion, but the alarming increase of persecutions of the Baha'i community in recent months further show the need to shine a spotlight on this issue. This year, over the summer in particular, Baha'is in Iran have faced what the New York Times characterised, and I quote, as a sweeping crackdown on their community. This new wave of suppression by Iran's Ministry of Intelligence has included unwarranted arrests of believers and faith leaders, a deeply concerning rise in the confiscation and destruction of property, and accusations that followers of the Baha'i faith have been acting as spies for Israel. Yes, of course, I'll get away to them.
Can I commend the Honourable Gentleman for bringing this forward, and also commend him for the hard work he does for the Baha'i community. I also share his concern for that community in Iran, and stress that Iran's treatment for the Baha'i community serves, as I believe, a litmus test for Iran's commitment to freedom of religious belief. So does the Honourable Gentleman agree with me that more should be done to stop the arbitrary arrest of Baha'is for spurious allegations, as one of many ways in which the religious freedom for Baha'is is violated, along with their other fundamental human rights?
And I pay tribute to the Honourable Gentleman, the work he does for the promotion of freedom of religious belief around the world. And he makes a very good point there, and I will try, I hope, in the course of my remarks, to make some reference and put some context into the situation that the Baha'is in Iran find themselves. Yes, of course.
The Honourable Member may be aware, but the people of the Baha'i faith are banned from accessing higher education in Iran, which is a sad means of repression from the state. Does the Right Honourable Member agree that denying access to education is Iran's way of keeping Baha'is youth isolated and powerless, and access to education is a vital right that should be protected?
I'm grateful to the Honourable Lady for that intervention, because it means that I can actually continue to take interventions, and I may not need to say quite as much about that particular subject when I come to that point in my remarks, because I am quite happy to take interventions, because I do think it's important that when the record is printed, that it is seen that this is not just a tiny concern, that this is a concern that goes across the House in this community. Oh, how can I not?
And I thank the Honourable Member for Orkney for giving way. He's making a powerful speech, and it's really important that this is placed on the record. I'm proud to be an officer of the APPG for the Baha'i faith, and I hope you will agree with me that this House must continue to hold Iran accountable for its violations of the rights of its own citizens in the Baha'i community, particularly during this global crisis. And will he join me in urging the Minister to speak up and speak out, because we do need action now?
Absolutely. In many ways, Baha'is are, this is not just confined to Iraq, but it's particularly acute in Iraq. They're all hanging fruit. They're a tiny religious minority. So, I think, speaking as somebody who over the years has campaigned on human rights, indeed before I came to this House as a Member of Parliament, it increases the obligation that we have, rather than diminishing it, that we should draw attention to the plight that we have. And we can do a lot as individual members of Parliament, but also I hope that the government, speaking for the country as a whole, will take that message very much to heart. Everything that we say as a permanent member of the United Nations Security Council, as a still, I hope, a country to which the world looks for as a force for good in the country, and a protector and creator in many cases of human rights legislation, that they should understand that this is something that matters to Britain, not just to individuals, but to our government as a whole. And just while I'm on the subject, I should place on record the appreciation that I have for the remarks of Lord Ahmed earlier in the year. They were heard by the Baha'i community in this country and beyond, and they were certainly very much appreciated. Yeah, of course.
I'm very grateful to the Honourable Member, who's been incredibly generous with his time. And speaking to York's Baha'i community just last week, again, they very much wanted to stress the importance of our government speaking out, because within Iran, the Baha'i community can't. Their aims are always altruist and peaceable in serving their communities. But will he also pass comment in the fact that many from the Baha'i community are not able to work in Iran because of the suppression and suspicion which is placed on them, when all they want to do is serve like the rest of the population?
A breach of human rights is a breach of human rights, and it's occasionally invidious to sort of try and construct a hierarchy of human rights, because the defining characteristic of human rights is that they are universal. But I think that one of the things that particularly concerns me is the pervasive way in which the Iranian state persecutes the Baha'i community. It's not just for the religious belief, it's excluding them from education, it's the closing of businesses, it is the whole range of different ways. And that's not an accident, that's a quite deliberate strategy, which is designed to persecute people simply because of their religious belief. And if you allow it to happen for the Baha'is, then it will happen to other religious minorities as well. And if it can happen in Iran, then it can happen in just about any other country. We're not safe unless everyone is safe when it comes to human rights and freedom of religion. The Baha'i international community reported 125 separate incidents of persecution in the first 10 days of August this year alone, a worrying development that signals a step up in the regime's attempts to crack down on an already heavily persecuted religious minority. By September the 1st, the number of incidents in the crackdown had almost doubled to 245, and I fear that doubtless it's even higher today. I want to take a few moments just to highlight a number of the developments that show the breadth and depth of these changes. Firstly, the regime has upped its campaign against religious minority leaders in Iran by rearresting 3 former members of the Informal Leadership Committee of the Baha'i community. Afif Naimi, Mavash Sabit and Fariba Kalambadi have already served 10 years of their life in prison for their service to the Baha'i community, and the Iran committee has been wound up. So all 3 have, in fact, retired from the roles of religious leadership. Furthermore, the mass arrest of 26 Baha'is in the city of Shiraz alone is exceptionally worrying. The number of Baha'is raided, arrested or recalled to prison has increased significantly since June. Yeah. Of course, yeah.
I'm truly grateful to the Honourable for giving way. He's making a really powerful speech, and in my constituency, I've been approached by a number of people who are incredibly concerned about this crackdown on human rights, abuses right across Iran, but particularly for those belonging to my Baha'i community in Halifax. And I thank them not only for bringing this to my attention, but for the community work that they do in Halifax as well. Would he agree with me that one of the things I found particularly heartbreaking in reading some of the information about what's happening in Iran is the arrest and detention of parents of young children, which leaves those children without parental care, just demonstrating the impact that it's having on families and children in particular.
This is where it becomes personal, I think, as all. You know, as a parent myself, I can only imagine what it must be like to find myself under that sort of pressure. And again, it touches on this point that I made earlier about the pervasive nature and the all-encompassing nature of the persecution of the Baha'is. Just about every aspect of normal, everyday life that we would take for granted, they find themselves excluded from, and as a systematic, it is this element of systematic oppression that I think is particularly concerning, to my mind at least. So, on the 2nd of August this year, Iran also sealed off the village and blocked the road access to Rushakanu in the Mazandaran province by sending in 200 armed agents of the Iranian state. 6 homes were demolished by heavy equipment, and 20 hectares of Baha'i-owned property were confiscated, according to the Baha'i international community. Amnesty International reports that villagers had their mobile phones taken to stop filming, and peaceful protesters were beaten and targeted with pepper spray. This follows a similar demolition of at least 50 homes in the village of Ivel, also in the Mazandaran province, in June 2021. In education, as the Honourable Lady from Rutherglen mentioned earlier, access is severely limited by the state. Most Baha'is are excluded from the national entrance examination to higher education institutions, as their applications are characterised as file incomplete. This just illustrates, Mr. Bates, the way in which bureaucracy can be used as a tool of religious oppression. File incomplete because they do not come from one of the 4 constitutionally recognised religions. This year, as of August 2022, more than 90 Baha'i students were prevented from enrolling in Iranian universities, according to the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. The Ministry of Intelligence has further accused believers of espionage and infiltrating education institutions. In 2020, Baha'i faith believers became unable to register for identity cards for a similar reason to those applying for higher education. The option of, quote, other religion, end quote, was removed from the application form. An example of Iran cracking down on even a hint of an oppressed minority, which has caused real problems, as the Baha'is are now not allowed to lie about their faith. Baha'i-owned shop closures have been another target of the Iranian regime in recent years. Iranian authorities have systematically closed Baha'i-owned shops without legitimate cause. We also have the horrific situation of more than 1,000 Baha'is facing legal hearings on false charges or summoned to put into overcrowded prisons, a situation that is unjust and unsustainable. But the cruelty does not stop there. In April 2021, Amnesty International reported that authorities prevented Baha'is from burying their loved ones in empty plots at a cemetery near Tehran, insisting that they bury them between existing graves or at the nearby Kavaran mass grave, a site related to the 1988 prison massacres. This ban was eventually lifted after mass public outcry, but the fact that it was ever even imposed shows the contempt that the Iranian regime has for the Baha'is within their own borders. The explicit policy to take away the social and economic rights of the Baha'i is driven by a memorandum from the Supreme Revolutionary Cultural Council back in 1991, which was prepared for the Supreme Leader to deal with what was termed the Baha'i question. Just consider the use of that term, the Baha'i question. This memorandum's provisions say that governments' dealings with the Baha'i community should be in such a way that their progress and development are blocked. The recent sweeping crackdown shows that this is just the latest in a long line of actions against believers of the Baha'i faith. The oppression of the Baha'is in Iran, however, has been noticed, and it will continue to be noticed, and it will be rightfully condemned by human rights campaigners, media and government. I welcome the comments of Lord Ahmed of Wimbledon earlier when he was quick to condemn this summer's developments and the government's commitment to working with international partners to hold Iran accountable. I hope that that will not be an isolated comment and that the government of this country will continue to call out this when they find it. What we are witnessing in Iran today is not a new development. The Baha'i community have faced an unjust assault on their freedoms for decades, but this new intensification is deeply troubling to watch unfold. For many years, Baha'i offices around the world have suggested that the treatment of their community in Iran offered an instructive litmus test on the sincerity of Iranian authorities to reform and respect human rights. In addition to the plight of the Baha'is, we witness a wider crisis of human rights engulfing Iran and taking the lives of young Iranians, most notably young women. Iran has failed that litmus test. The Baha'i community and all other persecuted religious minorities across the globe deserve better. They deserve our support. They deserve our actions and the actions of our government in calling out the actions of the Iranian government where they are seen. We will not ignore what is happening. I hope that if this is heard in Tehran, that is the one message that they will take from today's proceedings.
The question is if this House has considered the treatment of the Baha'i community in Iran. Minister to respond.
Thank you, Chair, and it's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, I believe, for the first time. And I'm also grateful to the Right Honourable Member, the Member for Orkney and Shetland, for securing this important debate and making sure that this important message continues to be heard. I also appreciate his dedication as Chair of the All-Party Parliamentary Group on the Baha'i faith. And let's be clear, Iran's human rights record is deplorable. Human rights violations are widespread and routine under President Raisi's government. Freedom of expression, peaceful assembly and women's equal participation in society have been further eroded in 2022. And the recent events of recent weeks following the shocking death of Mahsa Amini after her arrest by Iran's so-called morality police bring home the stark reality. Women in Iran fearing for their lives for what they choose to wear. Those who bravely take to the streets to protest against this injustice do so at great risk of their lives, and I'm in awe of them. I know from the previous debate and urgent question that we had, many in this House are as well. Mass arrests and the mistreatment of detainees are common. Trials continue to be marred by irregularities, and individuals receive little or no due process. The use of the death penalty is rampant and is on the rise. It's against this bleak backdrop that the Baha'i community face a sustained campaign of persecution by the Iranian authorities. The Baha'i community has long faced systematic discrimination and targeted harassment in Iran. And as the Right Honourable Member mentioned, acts of repression include the forced closure of Baha'i-owned shops and businesses, pressure to convert to Islam, and the denial of education, as was mentioned by the Honourable Member, one of the Honourable Members opposite. Over the recent years, there's been a marked increase by the state to identify, monitor and arbitrarily detain Baha'i people, and alarmingly, Iran shows no signs of stopping. On August the 1st, the Iranian Ministry of Intelligence confirmed the arrest of a number of Baha'i community members. This followed credible reports in July, particularly in Mazandaran province, of widespread raids of Baha'i homes, forced demolitions and property seizures. Since June, the community has reported a marked uptick in arrests, including, as the Right Honourable Member also mentioned in his speech, of 3 former spiritual leaders, with some detainees handed lengthy sentences. These reports point to one conclusion, that the Iranian authorities have made a conscious decision to intensify their repression of the Baha'i. While Iran's constitution offers protection for some faiths, there is widespread discrimination against minority religious or belief groups. This experience is noticeably worse for unrecognised faiths, such as the Baha'i. This government shares the view of the UN Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights in Iran, that discrimination against the Baha'i community is legally sanctioned by a lack of constitutional recognition in Iranian law and the absence of other legal protections. Recent reports that Iran is carrying out a campaign to persecute Baha'i followers in other countries, such as in Yemen, through their links with the Houthis, highlight the severity of Iran's suppression of religious minorities. As Honourable and Right Honourable Members are aware, the UK Government is committed to defending freedom of religion or belief for all, and to promote respect between different religious and non-religious communities. When we have concerns, we engage directly with governments at ministerial and official level and raise them both publicly and privately. We have repeatedly expressed concern at the ongoing repression of members of the Baha'i faith and have taken the following steps. On the 5th of August, as outlined earlier, my noble friend, Lord Ahmed of Wimbledon, issued a statement condemning the detention of members of the Baha'i community in Iran, as well as reports of forced closures of their businesses and land seizures. He made clear that the persecution of religious or belief minorities cannot be tolerated and is a serious violation of international human rights law. The UK continues to co-sponsor the annual UN resolution on the situation of human rights in Iran and works with international partners to ensure it expresses serious concern about Iran's mistreatment of members of the minority religious or belief groups, including the Baha'is. We will continue to hold Iran to account for its human rights record and have done so in relation to the crackdown against girls, women and other peaceful protesters. On September the 21st, my noble friend Lord Ahmed of Wimbledon, in his capacity as Minister for the Middle East, called for a rigorous and transparent investigation into Mahsa Amini's death and urged Iran to respect the right to peaceful assembly. On October the 3rd, my Right Honourable friend, the Foreign Secretary, summoned Iran's most senior diplomat in the UK to the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office. He made clear that instead of blaming external actors for the unrest, the Iranian authorities should take responsibility for their actions and listen to the concerns of their people. And yesterday, the UK government imposed new sanctions on the morality police and 2 of its leaders, as well as 5 individuals historically responsible for repression of protests. As the Foreign Secretary has said, the protests send a clear message that Iranian people are not satisfied with the path that their government have been taking, and Iran's leaders must now listen. The UK continues to demonstrate its global leadership on freedom of religion and belief in support of human rights in Iran and around the world. In July, the UK hosted the Freedom of Religion or Belief Conference. 47 governments, international organisations and other entities made pledges to take positive actions in support of this human right. And we will continue to build and strengthen coalitions with governments and civil society in order to promote and protect freedom of religion or belief for all. This government is appalled by the treatment of the Baha'i community in Iran and was appalled by the crackdown of peaceful demonstrators. And I can assure the House that this government remains committed to defend in freedom of expression and freedom of religion or belief for all, and to promote in respect between different religions and non-religious communities. We will continue to hold the Iranian government accountable for its human rights obligations, and we will continue to take action and to encourage the international community to join us when it does not. Thank you very much for the debate, and thank you very much for the honourable member for securing this important debate.
The question is that this House has considered the treatment of the Baha'i community in Iran. As many of that opinion say aye. The contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Order. Order.